Welcome again to the course of Introduction to Economics. I am your course instructor Shehzad Khan Durrani, lecturer, Institute of Business Studies, Kohat University of Science and Technology, Hangu campus. This is our lecture number 12 and our topic for today's lecture is price elasticity of demand. Outline for today's lecture, it includes price elasticity of demand. So this is our main topic. The further subtopics in it are, so we will try to understand the definition of the elasticity, the price elasticity of demand definition, the proper definition of it, and its mathematical representation, how we can represent it mathematically, we will talk about it, and the practical example of it after the mathematical expression. And then types or degrees of price elasticity of demand, we will also talk about it too. We will start from the basic concept of the price elasticity of demand. So we will start from the basic concept of the price elasticity of demand. So what is elasticity? Elasticity in economics, by definition, it is the demand and supply. Sometimes the demand and supply interact to ensure an equilibrium price and quantity or a market equilibrium. What's happening that sometimes there is a stretch, or there is, you can see that there is an expansion in demand, right? Or sometimes the supply stretch or contract, or you can also call it the expansion in supply, right? Why it's happening? Due to some of the determinants of the supply or the demand, right? So due to which, for example, they are getting far away from the market equilibrium or from the equilibrium point, right? So till the restorage point, for example, till they get restored to that equilibrium position, we say that there is an elasticity in demand and there is an elasticity in supply. So what is the elasticity of demand? The price elasticity of demand, and also there is a price elasticity of supply as well. But first we will try to cover price elasticity of demand in our lecture. So the price elasticity of demand, it is the degree of responsiveness of quantity demanded, right, of a commodity due to change in price. It means that there is a change in price due to which there is a change in quantity demand. If other things remains the same, as we discussed in our previous lecture, that these are the technology, these are the goals of the firm, these are other external forces, the political environment, or maybe, for example, the number of consumers, for example, if they are increasing or decreasing, for example, right? Or maybe, for example, the income effect, right? So these are called the other things. If it remains the same and it's only related to the price, if there is a change in price, there is a change in demand as well, right? Or in other words, we can define this in other words, the price elasticity of demand is the percent change in quantity. How many percent change in the quantity demanded due to percent change in price, and there is a percent change in price as well, right? And this is called the price elasticity of. So the mathematical representation of the price elasticity of demand can be, that is, change in quantity demanded in percentage divided by change in price, how much change occur in the price, how much change occur in demand, and given in percentage, right? So symbolically it can be represented as change. So this is the EP, represent price elasticity of demand. Sometimes it can be written as EP, and then you can D it, you can write D at the top of the E, right? So D means demand, price elasticity of demand, and elasticity is represented by E, right? So change in quantity divided by change in price, multiply by the original price and the original quantity that you have. This is the formula of calculating the price elasticity of demand, right? How we can calculate it? So EP stands for price elasticity of demand, which is in the formula EP, right? Then in the formula we have another one, we have the Q, which means original quantity demanded. How much is the original quantity? Then P stands for the original price, right? And then we have the change in Q, which is change in quantity demanded, right? And at the end we have the change P, which is change in price, right? So EP stands for price elasticity of demand, Q stands for original quantity demanded, P stands for the original price, change in Q, change in quantity demanded, change in P means change in price. Now let's understand this concept practically, right? So we will start from an example. Suppose the price of a commodity falls down from rupees 10 to rupees 9. So it means that there is a decrease in price from 10 to 9. How much is that? Which is 1, right? Then there is a quantity demanded of the commodity increased from 100 units to 120 units, right? So the quantity demanded of a certain commodity increased by 20 units. As we can see, 120 minus 120 units, we can see an increase. So the quantity demanded, the increase is 20, and the price is reduced just by 1 rupees, right? So we will try to find out the price elasticity of demand, right? First, we will try to understand this question again, right? So it is given that the initial price is rupees 10, which is here. So I just wrote here initial price rupees 10, right? Then we have the initial quantity demanded, which is 100, or the original is 100. Here the original price is 10. Then we have change in the price. How much is this? 10 minus 9, so rupees 1, right? And then we have the change in the quantity, and how much is the change in quantity demanded is equal to 120 minus 100, which is 20. This is the change, right, in the quantity demanded. Now we are able to solve. So we know the formula of the price elasticity of demand, change in Q divided by change in price, change in quantity demanded, change in price, right? And the original price multiply divided by original quantity demanded, right? So how much was the change in quantity demanded? 120 minus 100, which is 20. Change in price 10 minus 9, which is 1, right? And the original price here was 10. There was an original price was 10, and 9 was then deducted, which gave us 1, right? And the original units, for example, they were the 100 before there was an increase in price, right? So we just multiply it with the original price and the original quantity, right? So after the multiplication and the calculation, you will get 2 by 1, 2 divided by 1. So it means that you are getting it in percentage. It means that the price of elasticity of demand is 2%. So what does it mean, right? So this means that the quantity demanded, right, the quantity demanded increases by 2% due to fall in price by rupees 1. So it means if you are reducing the rupees by 1, there is a quantity demanded will increase in percentage, which is 2% of the whole quantity, right? Of the whole quantity, how much will increase? 2%, right? So from 100 to 120, how much is that? 2%, right? By just reducing rupees 1. And this is called the price elasticity of demand. Now we will do types or degrees of price elasticity of demand. What are some of the types or the degrees of the price elasticity of demand? So we will do it one by one. The first one, types or degrees of price elasticity of demand. The first one is the perfect elastic demand. So perfect elastic demand is equal to infinity. What does it mean? We will explain it. The second type, we have the perfectly inelastic demand. So elasticity of demand is equal to 0 here. Then we have the relatively elastic demand. So elasticity of demand is greater than 1 here. Then we have the relatively inelastic demand. Elasticity of demand is less than 1. And then we have the unitary elastic demand, which means that the elasticity of demand is equal to 1. So perfectly elastic demand, elasticity of demand is equal to infinity. What does it mean? It means that the quantity demanded increases infinitely, right? Or you can call it by unlimited quantity. There is no quantity, right? It's unlimited with a small fall in price, for example. Sometime, for example, let's say the prices of the gold. If it's slightly reduced, for example, you can see that the quantity demand increases infinitely, right? There's a sudden increase, a huge increase in the quantity demanded, right? So let's, or you can also say quantity demanded falls to 0 with a small rise in price. Nobody is going to buy it. Nobody is going to consider it, right? If there is a, what happened? If there is a rise in price, right? So the quantity demand falls to 0. Nobody is going to buy it, right? So this is the graph of the perfectly elastic demand. The demand here is actually perfectly elastic, right? Right? So it means, for example, that the quantity demanded increases infinitely. Infinitely, for example, you can see that there is an increase, right? Or increases infinitely or by unlimited quantity, right? With a small fall in price. If there is a small fall in price than the original price, so there is an increase and expansion in the demand. Or the quantity demands falls to 0, for example, right? With a small rise in price. Let's say this is P0, right? If you increase it to, for example, P1, then there is what? Quantity demands falls to 0. Nobody is going to buy it, right? That product, right? So we say that this is the perfectly elastic demand, where elasticity of demand is equal to infinity. The next one, we have the perfectly inelastic demand. Perfectly inelastic demand, elasticity, we say elasticity is equal to 0. What does it mean? The demand remains constant whatever may be the price. That is, price may rise or fall, so the demand is not going to fluctuate with the changes in price, right? So the demand is not fluctuating actually here with the, with what? With the rise or fall of the prices, right? Graphically, it can be represented as, for example, the demand here is constant, right? We cannot see an increase or decrease in the demand, right? Though there is, for example, there is stability in the price, then the price falls, then the price increase, but the demands remains the same. So this is called the perfectly inelastic demand, right? Where EP is equal to 0, right? And this means that the demand remains constant. There is no change in the demand, right? Though the price is increasing or decreasing, right? So we call it the perfectly inelastic demand. The next one, we have the relatively elastic demand, where elasticity of demand is greater than 1, right? When we say it's greater than 1, so it means that the percent change in demand is greater than the percent change in price. So the percent change in demand is greater than the percent change in price. So it means if there is a small decrease in the price, the demand, the quantity demanded is high, for example, than the change in the price. So that's why we represent it, or we call it EP is greater than 1, right? If EP is equal to 0, it means, for example, that there is no change in the quantity demanded. But if EP is greater than 1, so it means that the percent change in demand is greater than the percent change in price. Now we will understand this concept through a graph. Here, for example, we can see that the demand curve we have, then we have the initial price P1, and this was the quantity demanded for it. The quantity demand represented here is M1, right? Let's say, for example, if there is a change in demand, right? Change in demand occur, for example. Let's say change in demand. Let's say the demand reduced from M1 to M0, right? So there is, for example, a slightly change occur from P1, for example, to P0. Here, for example, this is a slight change as compared to demand. So change in D, for example, here is greater than the change in P. So change in D is greater than the change in P. In other words, you can say that change in P is less than the change in D. Change in P means change in price, which is less than the change in quantity demanded, right? And this is called relatively elastic demand, where we say EP is greater than 1. This is the symbolic or mathematical representation of the relatively elastic demand. Now, the next one, we have the relatively inelastic demand, right? Relatively inelastic demand, which is the opposite of the first one, which was the relatively elastic demand. Now we have relatively inelastic demand. So what does it mean? It means percent change in quantity demand is less than the percent change in price. Now here the quantity demanded is less, for example, than the percent change. Let's say if the price of a commodity is changed, right, and there is a big change in the price, but the quantity demanded is not that much is the price. So this is called the relatively inelastic demand, where EP is less than 1, right? Graphically, it can be represented as, this is the demand graph, which is sloping downward here, right? This is, for example, the initial price. Let's say this is P0, so the initial price is M0, right? Let's say, for example, the price reduced, and there is a really like a very good reduction in the price, right? The price reduced more than the change in the demand. Though the price reduced a lot, but we see that people are still not that much interested to buy that product, right? So change in D, for example, is less than the change in P. Change in D is less than the change in P, change in price and change in demand. In other words, you can say that change in price is greater than the change in quantity demanded, and this is called the relatively inelastic demand, right? So we have a condition where EP was equal to 0. There was no raise or increase in the quantity demanded. Then we have a condition where EP was greater than 1, right, where the quantity demanded was greater than the percent change in price, and now we have the EP less than 1, which means that the quantity demanded is less than the percent change in the price, right? And I also represented it graphically here as well. Now the next one, we have the unitary elastic demand, where EP is equal to 1, not equal to 0, not less than 1, not greater than 1, but equal to 1, right? What does it mean? So it means unitary elastic demand, and it means that the percent change in quantity demanded is equal to the percent change in price. So it means that how much there is a quantity demand, right? There is a change in the quantity demand, the same goes for the percent change in the price. So it means that the EP is equal to 1 here. So we call it the unitary elastic demand, right? And through a graph we can represent it. This is the demand graph sloping downward, right? We can see here, for example, initially, let's say P0, right? This is P0, and we have the M0 here, right? So we have here they are cutting the demand curve here. This is their intersecting point of the price and the quantity demanded, right? So then there is a reduction in the price, right? So for example, change in P, also there is a reduction in the demand. So we can see that change in D is equal to change in P, right? So it means that change in P is equal to change in D, right? So change in price is equal to change in demand, right? So this means that change in quantity demanded is equal to change in price, which means unitary elastic demand, and that means mathematically when it's represented, it means that elasticity of demand here is equal to 1, right? So this was called the unitary elastic demand. These are the references that I used while making my slides. Thank you so much. This was our topic of the price elasticity of demand that we discussed in detail.